Hello, I'm Deborah Goggin with the Department of Research Support at A.T. Still University. In this presentation, I will summarize the current guidelines for determining who can be included as an author of a journal article. There are several organizations that define authorship standards for journal articles for a variety of biological and health sciences disciplines. By far, the most accepted and recommended definition of authorship is provided by the International Committee of Medical Journal Editors, or ICMJE. Most ATSU researchers submit articles to journals that follow the ICMJE guidelines for authorship. I will summarize these guidelines in subsequent slides, but first I want to mention other organizations that most biological and health sciences journals rely on for defining authorship. For journals with a stronger focus on the biological sciences, authorship guidelines tend to be based on those established by the Council of Science Editors, or CSE. However, CSE recommendations are very similar to those of ICMJE. The Committee on Publication Ethics, or COPE, and the National Institutes of Health can also be consulted for recommendations about who qualifies for authorship. Another resource to consult for more details about authorship is Contributor Role Taxonomy, or CREDIT. Many journals and journal publishers are starting to recommend that submitted articles follow CREDIT guidelines. These guidelines require authors to disclose at submission of their article how each listed author contributed to the conduct of the research study and to the writing and editing of the article. The most important thing to know about the ICMJE authorship recommendations is that there are 4 specific criteria that must be met for an individual to qualify for authorship. A potential author of an article must meet all 4 of these criteria to be listed as an author. If a potential author only meets some of these criteria, for example, only 3 of the 4, or maybe only 2 of the 4, then the ICMJE recommends that that individual not be included as an author of the article. These specific recommendations are available on the ICMJE website under Recommendations for the Conduct, Reporting, Editing, and Publication of Scholarly Work in Medical Journals. Let's review the ICMJE criteria for authorship more closely. The first criterion that must be met by a potential author is that the individual must have provided substantial contributions to the research study reported in the journal article in at least one of the 2 following areas. First, the potential author had to provide substantial contributions to the conception or design of the study. So what does that mean? That means the individual had to originate the idea of the research study, or develop the research question, study design, or research protocol for conducting the study. Perhaps this potential author figured out how to perform the study to answer the research question. That substantial contribution qualifies them for authorship. Second, the potential author had to provide substantial contributions to the acquisition, analysis, or interpretation of study data. This individual may have obtained study data by performing the actual experiment or by recruiting study participants and collecting their data. Analysis and interpretation of collected data also applies here. Perhaps this potential author was a statistician who analyzed the study data and informed the study researchers what the results meant in relation to their study question or purpose. That substantial contribution through analysis and interpretation of data qualifies that individual for authorship. At this point, you might be wondering exactly what the ICMJE means by substantial contributions. Substantial contributions mean that the study would not have been possible without the help from that individual because their intellectual contributions facilitated the research process. Essentially, that individual was necessary to get the study done. Only one of these two possible contributions has to be met to fulfill the first criterion of authorship according to ICMJE recommendations. The second ICMJE criterion that must be met by a potential author is that the individual had to contribute to the writing process of the journal article in at least one of the two following areas. First, the potential author had to be involved with the drafting of the article. Essentially, the individual had to be directly involved with the writing of the first draft of the article. Second, the potential author had to review the article critically for its intellectual content. This role requires the potential author to verify that the content of the drafted article adequately conveys important and required information about the study. This person should also verify that all required disclosures are included in the article. Only one of these two possible contributions has to be met to fulfill the second criterion for authorship according to ICMJE guidelines. In some cases, a potential author has contributed in both areas by writing a section of the first draft of the article, like the methods section, and by reviewing the completed draft to evaluate the overall content. The third ICMJE criterion that must be met by a potential author is that the individual had to provide final approval of the version of the document to be published. Authors are meant to take responsibility for the conduct and reporting of their study. This requirement ensures that all listed authors agree that the article accurately and fully reports all aspects of their study in a clear and transparent manner. The fourth and final ICMJE criterion that must be met by a potential author is that the individual has agreed to be accountable for all aspects of the study. This criterion and the previous one are closely related because they ensure that the article and the authors of the article are following good publication practices and meeting all research ethics and accountability requirements. When an author agrees to be accountable for the content of their journal article, they are accepting responsibility for the study and indicating that they have the ability to answer any questions about the accuracy and integrity of the study and its results. This individual also accepts responsibility for investigating and resolving any questions related to the accuracy and integrity of their study. These are the four criteria recommended by the ICMJE for authorship, and many journals and journal publishers follow these recommendations. In addition to the four criteria of authorship, the ICMJE also suggests that listed authors have full confidence in the contributions of their fellow co-authors. Specifically, each author should be able to clearly and accurately identify what part or parts of the study their listed co-authors performed and are responsible for. Each author should also have confidence in the integrity of the contributions of their co-authors. Essentially, authors should believe that all listed co-authors have followed important research ethics and reporting conventions for all aspects of the study they participated in. For these reasons, honorary or guest authorship is strongly discouraged by journals and journal publishers. When you are preparing your journal article for submission, what can you do to make sure that all listed authors will be acceptable to your target journal? The most important thing to do is to read the journal's instructions about authorship. Although most biological and health sciences journals and journal publishers follow the ICMJE recommendations for authorship or related variations from CSE or other organizations, the exact definition of authorship used by your target journal can vary. So it is always a good idea to review the journal's instructions to make sure your article meets their requirements. Similarly, different health science and health professions disciplines may prefer different definitions of authorship. For these reasons, it is always a good idea to read the journal's author instructions. A final point about authorship that should be mentioned, particularly in relation to author instructions, addresses the increasing use of AI tools and large language models like ChatGPT in research. Specifically, current guidelines indicate that AI tools and large language models cannot be listed as an author. Because the rules of authorship require listed authors to take responsibility and accountability for the content of their study and article, AI tools cannot be listed as authors. These tools are not people and cannot be held accountable for the research. Finally, being an author of a journal article is a responsibility. As an author, you create a bond of trust with the readers of your article. Readers trust that the authors of the article have accurately reported their contributions to the study, that they provided a complete and accurate representation of the methods they used during the study, and that the results are reported fully and without bias. This concludes our presentation. We hope this information about authorship of a journal article has been helpful. Are you an ATSU faculty researcher? Do you have a research project that you would like assistance with? The Department of Research Support can help. Our staff can assist with research coordination and project management, statistical analysis, and manuscript editing. You can find out more about our department through the provided URL.